Ready?
Okay. Live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good morning and welcome to the March 22nd, 2022 meeting of the Board of Elections of Delaware County. I'm Gerald Lawrence, the chairman of the board, and with me are my fellow board members, Ashley Lunkenheimer and John McBlain. The first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. If we all stand, please. And I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have the agenda. It was distributed, I should say yesterday. I think it actually may have been distributed earlier than that last week, end of last week. But in any event, we've had a chance to look it over. Does anybody have any issues with the agenda?
No.
All right, I think we are ready to proceed. The first item is to consideration of the minutes from February 22nd, which were distributed before the meeting. Does anyone have any comment as to the minutes?
No.
With that, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Motion being moved and seconded. And is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The minutes have been approved. Next item is Mr. Allen.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Few things. Since we last met, the Supreme Court has come down with a pair of decisions, actually three, that directly affect Delaware County as well as every other jurisdiction in the Commonwealth. The first involved setting the maps for the congressional districts. The second involved Delaware County intervening, filing a motion to intervene on that decision to get a clarification so that precinct level committee persons would file by March 15th. The court not only allowed our intervention, but heard it, considered it, and Department of State actually joined us in the end on that. So thanks to Manly Parks and you, Mr. Chairman, we consulted. It was kind of a last-minute deal. I apologize for not getting word to all the board members until it was kind of over. But we had a very tight schedule to consider this, get together with the county solicitor. The motion to intervene was successful, and it was applauded by other election directors around the state who appreciated that we got that clarification. Then the third decision, finally, was to determine the state and Senate and state representative districts, which in turn affects state party nomination petitions. So those are going to be filed through March 28. The first batch of petitions was completed, was filed by March 15 this past week. It was very successful. We did have some stragglers come in at 4:45 with piles of petitions, but staff was up for the task and processed all of them. And I really appreciate the work of Patty and Lisa, who, among others in the Bureau office, to make that an orderly process. And then they forwarded all the documentation to Lorene and the Bureau office and at the wharf. So we're still set back a ways, and even though next with the decision on the state Senate and state rep maps, Crystal and her team were able to quickly reassign all the voters to all of their new state representative and state Senate districts. And in fact, Crystal's team came across an error that the state had that would have put an entire precinct, and please remind me which precinct it was? Norwood 3. It would have placed it in the wrong state Senate district. We alerted the Department of State. They confirmed that Crystal and her team were correct. We checked the maps, and they corrected their system internally. So not only did our staff quickly move to get the voters in the right districts for the May 17 primary, but also, basically did a great job of bird dogging the maps and making sure that they were implemented properly for the Department of State.
Mr. Allen, first of all, great job. Thank you so much for doing that. I was just wondering how many voters approximately would have received change notices that were affected by the change notices?
If there's no change notices, that will be for a polling place, but our cards will be,
Sorry.
And Crystal, for anybody watching, please introduce yourself.
Crystal Winterbottom, voter registration. The change notices, the ID cards do not have districts listed on there, but if they went to the Votes PA website, and search your name, that would show districts. So we don't send ID cards for that. We would send that for polling place changes.
So how many were affected by the changed maps, just generally then?
I did not bring those numbers, but I do have those.
Was it a large or thousands, tens of thousands?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
It depends on which Senate to which Senate or which legislative to which legislative, but yes, I do have those broken down.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we'll be sure to get those to the board ahead of next meeting and then perhaps in an email in between now and then. Next, I would like to ask Ms. Hagan to discuss the progress that's been made as far as processing the vote by mail and absentee applications, which have arrived in kind of like flood waves. It's almost been tidal. You know, we go 4 or 5 days receiving only 10 or 20, and then suddenly we receive, 2,000 to 12,000. Come on.
Yes, good morning. The Bureau staff has been processing applications both. There's 2 types we receive, the online as well as the hard copies. And as Jim said, the hard copy has been coming from the post office very sporadically. So actually the first mailing we received from the post office was over 15,000 in one day. So that immediately put us at a significant disadvantage. But the staff has done an amazing job. We've brought in a couple long-term temps that have helped us in the past that knew the system well and could just get up and moving quickly. So at this point, we only have, with online and hard copies, just under 5,000 backlog. So we've processed not only that 15,000 we received the first day, but we've received several thousand more since that time. So overall, at this point, I can report that we have received, with both types, 47,000 applications. We have approved, at this point, just over 25,000, and we have, as I said, just under a 5,000 backlog at this moment, and we're working through identifying, sending letters out to people if there are ID issues or there was no signature or no date of birth. The staff has been working quite a bit of overtime to try to achieve this, but we've been trying to keep things flowing as quickly as possible. And also the third parties. We've received a significant number of applications from third-party voters who, with no nonpartisan issues on the ballot in the primary, cannot participate in the primary. So the online, the nice thing for us on that is that automatically generates an email message to them. But for the hard copies, which we've received well over 1,200 at this point of third parties, we have to do an individual letter and mail that out to them. So not only are we processing, but we're staying very current on our messaging to the voters, either by emails or hard copy.
That's terrific, Lori. Thank you.
A question, do you generate reports? Again, I'm still somewhat fairly new here, so do we generate reports, like say on a weekly basis as to how many applications have been received, how many have been processed, what the breakdown is by municipality or any? I mean, I saw some of those reports at the very end of the municipal election last year.
Sure. The state system, the SHORE system, does have reports. Now, that will be able to generate what we have processed and approved. The state system does not take into account for all the applications that we receive. If it's rejected, that would not be in those counts. So we've been trying to track to give those ideas, but I would imagine very soon we could begin to release those SHORE reports. Obviously, nothing's been sent out because we don't have ballots yet, so it would only be a representation of those people that we've processed.
Right. Once the larger picture, perhaps, John. Once we start sending ballots. The code provides that parties and candidates, I guess both of them, have standing to request a list of what's been processed and what's been distributed. And I think what we've often done in the past is said, we're going to release a list at some interval, because otherwise you'd be running a report every day for everybody that asked for it. So we release them, and Lorene can probably further explain that, but every 2 days, every other day, and then maybe every day as it gets closer or something like that.
I think in the beginning, if memory serves me, and I have my notes, I think we did it Tuesday at the end of the day and Friday end of day. And then, as you said, as it became closer, I think we tried to do it 3 times a week. And we released that to both party chairs, and any campaign or candidate who requests it certainly can add the board if you wish to receive those notices as well. I would defer to Mr. Allen, but I think that could happen.
If the board is okay with that, I would like to receive the reports.
We'll definitely begin to arrange that. But before Lorene leaves the podium, I just want the board to know that she's done a fantastic job leading that team and making sure that because like she said, when we got inundated with that big drop after days of nothing, it put us behind the 8 ball, and the team stepped up out at the wharf, and whether it was overtime or whether it was bringing in other part-timers, they all put their shoulder to the wheel and got us moving in a big hurry. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask one question? Just some planning purposes. And I realize there's probably varying hopes or thoughts about what might happen. But right now, we've got the Supreme Court considering whether or not mail-in balloting is going to continue. My guess probably will continue. But in the small percentage chance that there is a decision that upholds the Commonwealth Court ruling, I didn't know whether we had any thoughts about, we've already got 47,000 people that have sent in applications. Do we kick out a postcard or a letter or something like that to them saying that, you're not going to, if the court rules a certain way, you're not going to get a mail-in ballot? Or do we have any sort of thoughts of contingency planning if that happens?
We're fortunate that the vendor that won the contract, Fort Orange Press, has an abundance of supplies during this, this period where the supply chain is really a big issue. So they have the ability to produce the envelopes, or if we need to, shift gears and mail out a letter in that instance to all the individuals who applied for mail-in ballots under Act 77. And we haven't discussed this with them because, quite honestly, we know it's a possibility, but it's almost like, you don't want to, or we're whistling through the cemetery right now, trying to make sure. But we do have a vendor with the capacity to shift gears, and instead of mailing out ballots in that instance, we would be mailing out notices. We would be working with the Public Relations Department. We would be working with the political parties and the campaigns to inform as many people as loudly and as clearly as possible that that has changed. So far, as you said, it has not changed. They had a hearing on it, but there was no clear indication, and unless Manley wants to correct me, how soon there may or may not be a ruling. They may wait until after the May 17 primary. And I think for the sake of good order, election administrators across the Commonwealth would hope that as well. Because at this late date, creating that big of a change in the system, it would be problematic, to say the least.
Yeah, I think that the phrase, which one you used it, whistling through the cemetery, but yeah, it's totally a guessing game now. And for what it's worth, although it probably only adds to speculation, someone who was at that argument, I wasn't there, drew the conclusion from one of the comments from the bench that the court, even if they considered it, wouldn't rule to affect this current election cycle because it's already started and people are dependent on it. So hopefully that is indeed the case. But I think you're right, John. It's prudent that, and obviously Jim has thought about it some. If there is some ruling that comes down, we will give notice and do our best to publicize it because we don't want people to make other plans for election day and be.
Yeah, it's not as big a nightmare as running an election in a pandemic, but it's up there.
Yeah, I also think just another point, keep in mind the Department of State, think of their communication skills, what you will probably be also reaching out very actively. So that's yet another source of information to the voters should this happen, I suspect.
Well, that's what, I have no doubt that, should the court rule, to uphold the Commonwealth Court ruling, there would be all kinds of PR, free PR that would be going along with that. I think we should all, and it sounds like we already have considered it, but my opinion would be that we should consider, sending a mailing, to each voter who has applied,
I think
to
so too, yeah.
tell them you've got to go in person or, presumably submit an excuse absentee ballot.
Right. That would be the option to send them another application, but again, that gets into a difficult, then we'd have to redo all of the things that Lorraine and the staff at the wharf have already done. And, taking those voters from mail-in to absentee. So, there's a possibility that we would have to open up kind of a super voter center to be able to process those changes from mail-in to absentee, but hopefully it won't come to that. So, you're welcome. In terms of contracts and meetings with vendors, we've started to meet with Fort Orange Press, which is our vote-by-mail vendor, and then also Phoenix Graphics, which is our Election Day ballot vendor. Those meetings have gone well. We're basically trying to plan around the delays that have been incurred by the remapping process. So with the March 28th deadline for state senate, state representative, and candidates for state party positions, that puts us 3 weeks behind on a very tight schedule for logic and accuracy testing for Jackie Dunn and her team at the voting machine warehouse, for vote by mail, ballot preparation, for the test decks, everything. So I want to consult with the board because there could be a point at which, or I think there will be a point at which, come April 5th or 6th or 7th, somewhere in there, we really cannot wait forever for every last decision. And if there's a ruling and there's a question about someone being on the ballot or not being on the ballot, we've got to keep them on the ballot and proceed. Otherwise, because just the test deck process, just preparing the test decks, and test decks are pre-marked ballots that are prepared by the printer that you run through the scanner before you shut down the database, or lock the database, I should say, for the election. And you want to test to make sure that votes for Smith are logged for Smith and votes for Jones that's a 6-day process. So if we were to wait until the last Commonwealth Court decision, which could come as late as April 11th or 12th, that would put us at April 18th just on the test decks, if we work through Easter weekend. So we're going to have to move sooner than that, because otherwise we're not going to have voting equipment ready. We're going to have vote-by-mail ballots going out the first week of May, which is unacceptable. We're going to have to move, and I would hope I can get an indication of the board's support of that move.
Yeah, Jim, I've given this some thought since the date that the Supreme Court order came out. And for those who might, we don't have a huge audience here, but for those who may be looking at this meeting online or looking at it later, recognize that the Supreme Court's order, which adjusted the election calendar for the state House and state Senate districts, moved back not only the petition date, but the subsequent events that play off that petition date, objections, the hearings relating to those objections. The court set a decision deadline for the action by the Commonwealth Court should there be objections to any of those petitions. And then ultimately there could be appeals to the Supreme Court. And as Jim observed, that really restricts our ability to timely distribute mail ballots and to do the testing and the other things. Historically, we have held our ballots to the last possible moment, because the idea that you have a printed absentee or mail-in ballot in front of a voter that has a name on there, that subsequent to the ballot being printed, the name is stricken from that ballot, is not a desirable circumstance. We want people to only have the candidates that are actually on the ballot, on the printed ballots in front of them. But it does create this balancing act of what do? You have pending litigation that sometimes drags on, and you get to a tipping point where you're, for perhaps one candidate in one election district, you're holding up, we already have 47,000 absentee and mail-in ballot requests. So we have to at some point decide, well, this is our drop dead date. In the event that there is a challenge, and again, we don't know that there will be challenges. I know a number of these races are sole candidate primaries, which means there probably won't be challenges. Obviously, you have these state committee races on these ballots where there may well be challenges. Frankly, those are party elections, and although we administer them for the political parties, I have somewhat less concern about an additional candidate appearing on those ballots. Certainly, I'm hopeful that any issues with respect to the State House and State Senate are resolved, but Jim raises the point, what if they're not, and what if it's April 7th or 8th or 10th or whatever the date is? Are we going to go ahead and print ballots with the petitions, knowing that there's the potential that somebody's going to be knocked off? And I've always been very hesitant to do that in the past, but the circumstances that we've had in the last couple of years with a very substantial increase in the number of absentee and mail-in ballots. It used to be we only had absentee, and it was a relatively small number, and we could push the deadline a little bit later, perhaps. And secondly, the issues that people seem to universally be still experiencing with the timeliness of the mails. I think we will have to look at printing the ballots on a drop dead date, whatever that date is, and if somebody is later on taken off the ballot, dealing with that consequence when it may happen. That's my thoughts.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. I talked to Mr. Allen. I think that's the way we have to proceed at this point.
Is there a recommendation on that date?
Well, I would like to go as early as possible, and in the perfect scenario where there aren't any significant, and by significant I mean geographically significant in particular, objections, I would not only for the vote by mail reasons that you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, but also for the logic and accuracy testing that we have to conduct at the warehouse. We can't create those V drives for the logic and accuracy testing until after the test decks are done, until after we lock down the database. And that's a 15-day process. And that assumes that we're able to get fully staffed, which lately has been more challenging to find part-time staff to work at the warehouse. So it affects even election day voting. I'm not worried about the printing of the ballots. That can happen relatively quickly. But I am concerned about all of the steps and getting all of the voting equipment ready. But in a perfect scenario, to answer your question, April 5th, if we're a little nervous about a couple of cases and it looks like they might be decided April 6th or April 7th, I could see holding off until then, but I really can't see holding off much later than that.
And I don't have the Supreme Court's order with me, but I think April 7th was one of the decision dates. But I mean, I read it a week and a half ago, so my memory isn't great. I have a lot of other things going on.
Yeah, I do not have it handy, but I have a similar recollection.
It's
that
going to be
that's
one
the
of
date.
those dates, and we'll figure out what it is. Secondly, my concern about the election day equipment, I 100% agree with you, Mr. Allen, about to begin the testing and set the V drives. And without getting too deep in the weeds, I think your point about the printing is very much relevant because, for instance, if the back end of the system, if there is a lever or a button, A29 that comes off, when you actually print the paper ballot, you just don't print the name for A29. It eliminates the voter confusion issue of having names on the ballot, even though perhaps that is an extra space on the ballot. It'll just be blank, and we can lock the system to not record any votes on that blank space. So I think you're 100% correct in moving forward with the programming and the testing and the actual printing of the ballots, because that can be done closer to the election. We can take care of the voter confusion issue there. For me, it's much more an issue about the mail ballots than the confusion of any ballots on election day.
Thank you, board members. Next on the items I wanted to report on, Siobhan Flores, who manages the equipment that's used to process the incoming vote by mail and then on election day slice open and extract the ballots on election day from the envelopes that have been approved. She's been working with our third party, our vendors for various printing equipment and envelope opening equipment. So we're now looking at the possibility of speeding up the process by using only the Agasar equipment, which is the middle row of cutters, and by eliminating the use of the much slower OPEX equipment. And basically it would be making 2 passes through the OPEX equipment, first to open the exterior envelope, and then you don't have to change the setting on the blade. It automatically reads the height of the envelope and then can open the secrecy envelope for the extraction of the ballot. So that would allow us to potentially reduce the number of staff needed for those 2 lines of equipment, potentially return some equipment that might save us a considerable amount of money, and accelerate with the processing. We would have to buy a slight conveyor system that would capture all the envelopes, so we would do a better job actually of capturing all of we've always done a good job of capturing the exterior envelopes, but now we would also capture all of the secrecy envelopes as well and be able to store those. So we may be able to save some money and make this actually run more efficiently. Lastly, I'm going to be emailing to you and sending you hard copies of a comparison of the provisional envelope changes. We had discussed this at the board meeting back on, I want to say it was November. It was middle of the counts, the original counts. I want to say around November 12th, and there were questions about voters signing blank 2 and blank 4, and Lorene successfully worked with William Penn Press, printing rather, and so they wouldn't go the full redesign that we wanted, but they did accentuate the 2 locations where the voter needs to sign, made it much clearer with a giant X, and we got them to put in a 15% screen or a tint, a gray screen that makes it both of those signature areas pop off the page. So we promised to follow up with you on that, and thank you, Lorene, for working with William Penn on that. So we still want to go further with that redesign and make it even clearer. But William Penn is worried about doing too much to change something that they think they have to get approved from the Department of State. So,
and well, first of all, thank you, Lorene, for taking the lead on that. Mr. Parks, have you looked at it and you have an opinion as to whether? it
Yeah,
complies with
I
the
have
law?
looked at it. I think that it looks great. It is definitely more apparent where the signature boxes are by the grayscale of those boxes. And because we haven't altered the substance of the layout or text, you really don't get into the legal question of whether the Department of State has absolute control over that or not. So we don't have to cross that bridge yet. And we may never have to cross that bridge if we are happy with the way this works.
So is this really a change to the graphics and the printing
It's just
style and the
it's a
sizes and those kinds of things?
Graphics and the 15% grayscale in the signature boxes, that's it.
Is there anything additional we can do to say you need to sign twice to the judge? I mean, I know we educate. I know you already have a good education program, but clearly some keep missing it.
We're definitely going to reinforce it, whether it's at the call center on Election Day or in the training ahead of Election Day, that the voters need to sign. It's also the new design is going to be featured in the Election Day guide, in addition to being featured in the course. So again, we're trying to make it, there's still going to be issues if someone submits the ballot without the privacy, the secrecy envelope, a naked provisional ballot. There's still going to be issues with some people not signing one or the other blanks, but we're hoping to reduce that.
It is. It's painful to sit here when objections come in and the ballot's signed in one place and not the other, and you're 99 or as certain as you can be that the voter was there and did everything they could do and the mistake was made. So to the extent we can eliminate those mistakes, it ultimately makes our job easier because we don't have to listen to the objections and be compelled to follow the law and strike the ballots.
Mr. Chairman, right, and just perhaps, for belts and suspenders, I know as we were going through the process last year, we had questions even amongst ourselves whether, 2 was essential or 4 was essential, maybe we can just have Mr. Parks take a look at that and confirm, what it is and go over that with voter registration so that they know as they do their initial screening of the provisional ballots, which one is essential to count and which one's not.
Well, it's pretty simple now. We have a ruling from our Court of Common Pleas on this specific point as a result of the most recent election cycle, finding that signatures in both boxes are required. So, we're operating under the assumption that that's the law of the court, and that, there's no opposite guidance from a higher court in the Commonwealth. So there being none, I think we have to conclude that both signatures are required and, absent a change in the law or a ruling from a higher court taking issue with that or changing that proposition, I think that's what this board should abide by and what Crystal's team should abide by when they're screening them.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I just had one question too. When you talked about this new equipment, that was just preliminarily, you're looking into it, and then we will have more information before purchases are made.
Correct. We're not moving any equipment out right now. We'll still have it available on May 17th, but we are going to move toward using the one set of cutters and openers as opposed to both at this election.
Okay, and then the last question I had was you mentioned the maintenance and retention of the secrecy envelopes, and I just want to spend a second on that because there's so many issues of the scrutiny of this process. But I don't know that that's required by the code, the maintenance of the secrecy envelopes, is it? It would seem to me what's the forensic value of that? They're all the same, they're all blank, they give no indication of whose ballot it was or how the ballot was marked.
Yeah, it's not been our interpretation to this point that they're required, and precisely for the reason you've identified, there's no forensic value. The whole point of the secrecy envelope is they're all totally identical to one another, and if they are marked in some identifying fashion, that disqualifies that ballot inside. So that would almost certainly, I think that marked envelopes of that sort would have been retained up till now because they were unique, because they were marked, and because that mark disqualified the ballot potentially. But I agree with you that I don't know that it's necessary or that there would be any forensic value to it.
Well, let's make sure before we spend money to preserve them whether we need to or should. Okay, that's the only point I had. Anybody, anything else? All right.
So next up,
Yeah, so for the first time, Ms. Dunn, good morning. See, I looked down, I had to think for a second to not say Mr. Savage, but welcome, and I hope your first month has gone well.
Thank you. Well, I want to first thank the board and Jim Allen for this opportunity and everyone who has welcomed me and made this transition smooth as possible. Okay, on the agenda for today, I have Trainer, Upper, Lower, and Lenox Park. A recommendation to be moved from the community center, which has been shut down by the code enforcer. We did hang the signs, we did the inspection. So I've just recommended that. The party leaders were notified. I heard nothing back to object to it.
Did you say the community center has been closed for code problems?
Yes.
Huh.
and just for the record, could you please make it clear where we're moving it to?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
The municipal building that has been used in the past as a polling location. So we went out there, did another inspection to make sure everything was the same and fine, and everything is where we need it.
So it's 3 precincts, 1
Into the
voting
one
location.
location, yes.
And the space is adequate?
Yes.
Okay. And you did the survey, we have the information here. It complies, there's no elevator.
The exceptions that are, the not applicable about handrails and other things, those are not ones that render it inaccessible, correct?
Correct.
All right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Motion
Thank
carries.
you.
Mr. Chairman, before we leave that item, I just want to make sure the board understands that we may have to call a meeting for the limited purpose of going over additional precinct changes ahead of the 4th Tuesday in April for the sake of good order. So we've got some that we think we can settle very soon in Middletown, thank you. And then we've got some others that we're still seeking solutions to in Upper Darby.
Darby, yes.
So.
All right. I mean, we can do it either way. We could do them after, but we could talk about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
This whole 4th Tuesday thing is becoming regular. I think people are starting to expect it. So now if we go and switch from it, I'm worried.
Well, I
we'll
wouldn't
get
want to
backlash
switch.
for that.
I would have an additional, very brief meeting for that limited purpose.
Okay.
So.
All right. Ms. Jackson.
Good morning. Lisa Jackson, Campaign Finance Supervisor.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. So this morning we have 2 petitions to waive campaign finance fees. One is from Friends of Bibiana and the other is from Friends of AG. And both committees are citing COVID-relating concerns as why their reports were returned in late.
And how late were they?
Both were over the allowed 20 days, so they had
Okay.
the maximum fine of $250 each.
So they were pretty late. Okay.
Yeah, they were very late,
And are they both consistent with our practice, first-time offenders?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion being moved and second. Is there any discussion? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to waive the campaign finance violation, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right, we are at general public comment. Is there any general public comment? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Michael Pupio.
Good morning, Mr. Pupio.
Just wanted to stop in, thank the board. Thank you for all you do. Most people don't pay attention to this till it's over. And then we're here discussing outcomes or questions or challenges or how things should be interpreted. The one suggestion I made to Manley earlier as you were discussing provisional ballots, that maybe you can consider an addition to the judge indicating that, they're only supposed to give the provisional voter the ballot and the secrecy envelope. and then they get, those two items get given back to the judge, and then the judge puts them in the envelope. In that one matter that I was working on, I firmly believe that that's what occurred, because there were only three or four provisional ballot voters, I can't remember, and all of them were naked. And that has to be a systematic issue that took place. If there were 5 and 2 were naked, okay. But all of them there, I would submit to you that's a systematic topic, and maybe you could just tweak your instruction so that's a topic we never deal with again. But you never know. But thank you all for what you do. Thank you for the staff. It's that time of year, and it's never easy. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Anything else? All right. Next meeting date as of now is April 20, hold on, 4th, I think. Oh. Yes, April 26th. I'll learn how to work my phone eventually. It's had the same one for 4 years. So April 26th, unless we have to have an interim meeting to do some polling place changes. With that, I think we are adjourned.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
We have to call to order though.
We are going to come to call to order and come to session for the Delaware County Voter Registration Commission. And we have one item today, an update on the canvassing of the return mail and the national address changes. And Ms. Winterbottom is making her way to the podium.
Not so much more to report. I would say we're the about 1,800 that we had sent out to get address verification to the voters. I would say less than half have returned back. They're slowing up coming back, but sometimes they come back in bulk, but we're still waiting on some.
Yes, ma'am.
When did they get removed?
If there's no activity on a voter record for 2 federal elections, then they go into the inactive status also. It depends on, there's a lot of reasons to inactivate, whether a letter came back undeliverable or no activity. But after 2 federal elections, they will be inactive. They'll get sent a 5-year notice, and then on that 5-year notice, it says the date, which would be the next general election, that they would be removed and canceled. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Winterbottom. Before we adjourn, I don't see any public comment for the Voter Registration Commission, and seeing none and no other business, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.